Welcome back to part 2 of our rock guard build, or as I prefer to think of it as, a track keeper honor, because that's going to be its primary purpose, is to keep these tracks, the rail, from going off. Mostly the idler sprocket. Occasionally I have had it actually come off the back sprocket, which is a real pain in the butt. So the first thing I'm going to do is figure out the mounting location for the bolts. There's going to be 4 bolts on either side that'll go in here. I'm going to weld these nuts to the side of the track frame, and what I've determined is from the top of this nut face to the bottom of here will be perfect for 2.5 inches. Give me 1/8 of an inch beyond here so I can weld the back of it and have a nice little corner for a fillet weld, and make the top edge of this flush with that. It'll be a little bit close to the edge up here, but I think that's fine because it's going to have an entire plate about 5 inches wide. So then how that will look on here, and I have these all marked out. 5 inches is going to be 16 of them. The location of that hole will be right about there. So what I thought I would do is, before I cut these to length, since I have a mag drill, is cut the hole first, cut all the holes, and then cut them to length. So I'm going to cut this one off though, because I'm going to, if I can get the hole in the right location, I'll use this as a pattern to easily line up the holes for the other ones. So I put the paint on here, it's dried. I think the best way to make a fine mark is to paint it and then scratch it off with this. So 2.5 is the center. And then the face of this, or the wrench size, is 1 1/8 inches. So I need 9/16 from the top down. There. So this is a 3/4 inch bolt, 13/16 hole saw or annular drill, which is what I use to do the curves and the cutouts for the roller bearings. I'm hoping this will be enough. It's only going to be a 1/16 of an inch clearance. I'm hoping it's enough, but I'll use it because I have a relatively easy way to elongate a hole if it gets tight or is too snug against one side. So I'll go with this. Hope for the best. The only problem with using that as a pattern is I don't have enough clearance here, so I can't do that. So what I can do instead is I have a 3/4 inch bit This is a 13/16 hole, so I'm not going to be able to get dead center, but I should get darn close. Before I go too crazy, let's see what this will look like. So I do have a washer here. You can see here it's pretty much flush, but with a washer here, this should not bottom out. That's basically how it's going to go. Yeah, I'm sure I will have some issues with these because that's rather tight, but that's fine. My plan is to mount these all on, put the nut and bolt on like this, and then clamp this in place and then tack weld this, so I'll have the best chance of these holes lining up if I'm welding the nuts on with the bolts in their holes already. "15 holes, plus my pattern is 16, so 16 brackets. All I have to do is cut them all off and we'll be good to go. So all these mounting brackets are done. I have one mocked up here. There's basically just going to be one between the roller bearings, which is what these pockets are for. So centered in there, and there. So for a 1/8 inch reveal on the bottom, this is 2.5. This is 3/8 plus 1/8 is a 1/2 inch. So these blocks are exactly 2 inches. So I think I'm going to tack all these with the MIG, which works out better because you're less likely to move the piece with the MIG to tack weld it than I would be to stick weld it. But then once they're all tacked in place, then I'll use the 70/18 stick to weld them home. So they're all tacked on, but now what I need to figure out is this corner. I really want to put a decent weld there. because that's probably going to be more important to the strength of this corner than is the back side, which would be under here. But the issue with this is this corner is this corner, so there is just a little bit of a radius here, just probably from wear and the flat stock that was used to make it, but not much. My options are to weld whatever I want to here, make a fillet, and then grind this edge here to let it fit. But what I'm thinking of is maybe grinding a bit of a gouge in here and welding it. Maybe the 6011, which is a deeper penetrating, won't be as much superficial, but more deeper. So I think I'll try that. So I'll gouge these out with a grinder, see what that looks like. So you can see that little bit of weld, that basically half the length of that, did suck it in. Hopefully you can see the bottom there. There's a space. So it took it out of square. So I'll do the back side. It may bring it back some, it may not. I may have to be more aggressive at alternating sides. It's not critical that it's exactly 90 degrees, but obviously I want it as close as I can. So I welded the back side. See what that did for square. No, didn't do much. So I'll have to try a different technique for the next one. So this one, I welded the back side, put a couple beads in it, and it didn't seem to move it any, and I welded the entire thing, and it's still square. So for whatever reason, welding the back side didn't impact how this piece sets. So I will weld the front side here, I'll gouge it, weld the front side, and see if it stays square. So just a single bead there in the groove that I made on this side, and it did suck it in a little bit to make it just the slightest bit off square. So what I think I will do is do the back side of these two, go a second pass on the back side with a 7018, which is what my plan was, and then do this side here. So it's 2 passes on each of those brackets on the underside. So these 2 here that I have not welded the corner yet. What does that look like? Huh. There's no movement. Isn't that something? Stayed just as square as when I tacked it. And those... Alright, so I finished welding these. I did grind out what appeared to be too much of a fillet. There's still quite a bit of a round there, but we'll see. Let me put it up here what it looks like. Hopefully you can make it out. There is a bit of a gap in there. And yes, a gap along the whole length, so I'm guessing I'll have to basically grind out that corner. My other option is to mark this. Maybe that's the best solution, because it wouldn't take much just to knock this corner off. Here, let me point with my pointy finger to knock the corner off here and let that sit flush up that way. This way it seems to be okay. It's resting against those brackets pretty well. Tight fit. And it seems to fit okay. So yeah, I think I'll just grind this. I'll mark it with some paint so I know where I need to grind. Fit it again. It's heavier every time I put something else on it. I put the rest of the nuts and bolts on. Might have been a mistake, we'll see. I don't know if the nuts are keeping it away from there or whether I just need to tap it in after I've snugged it up against the bottom. Take all these off. I thought that I might need to chamfer the edge of this because there's that weld bead right here. So I'm guessing that's probably what I'll have to do. Funny, because this one seems to be nice, but as it goes along here, they seem to go further away. Well, the other thing I'm thinking is maybe on this flat there's some beads, some spatter that might be causing it not to go in. Well, look at that. That seems better. I did a little of both. Actually, I did more grinding on these But you can tell this frame, at least the bottom part where the rollers bolt to, is not mild steel. It grinds a lot harder than mild steel does. But I will call that good. So the next thing is to put the nuts on here. I'll mark them out so I can clean the paint off so I have a decent surface. And again, I may use the MIG just because it's less likely to move around. But first I'm going to see if I need to chamfer any of the bottom of these to miss that. Or not. That one seems fine. So the center of the bolt, this one seems to fit fine. You can see there's not much of a fillet there weld-wise. Here's not much, but here, this looks like where they stopped the weld and started it. This area here is pretty big, so guessing it'll be easier to grind that down. Well, I mean, it's not going to be easier to grind it down, but it may just be a more straightforward approach than to try to chamfer the nut. Alright, I think this is take 5, 6. What take it is? Lost count. Well, so this one is still not clearing. Okay, so I've got it pretty close. These two middle ones with the offending ones, I ground a little bit on the track frame and a little bit on the rock guard corner. But I think I'm in a position now where I want to weld the nuts on. This one is tight against it. This one is not so tight, so when I weld it, I'm just going to take and hold it that way and tack it so it's firm against the frame, and there'll be a bit of a gap. Same with this one and same with that one. There is a bit more I can do, but I can do that after these have been welded to the frame, and I'll use these bolts to snug it up that way and probably gouge a bit more out of the corner of the track frame. So let's tack these in place and Well, I am not having good luck with the MIG. You can see there. I don't know if it's the contamination or it's just my skill. Maybe the setting's not right. I mean, it tacked on there fine, and see a couple of beads look okay. But I'm gonna go back to 6011, so that'll eliminate any contamination issue and hopefully give me better luck. Well, they're on there, with the exception of one. We won't talk about the welds. But I think they'll hold. I think they're stronger than they are pretty. This one doesn't quite make it. I marked out with a white where I need to gouge that out just a little bit. But the other three are on there, snug. So I don't need this anymore. Well, that was the easy one. Now we get to do that same thing under here, but we have some challenges because there's some additional plates. So to open up these holes a bit so the bolts will go in, this tool works really well. This is just a die grinder, and I got a bit of the a set of these bits. It just says burr set. I guess that's what they're called. So there's all kinds of different shapes. Generally I will use either this large cylinder or the smaller one. I think occasionally I've used this one. So this is the one I could not get the bolt in. This one I could get it in, but it was awful close on this side, so I'm going to take just a little bit off where that white mark is. This is the offending one. I still may need to take some out towards the top more. I think I could start it, but it's going to be too tight, so. Yeah, just the top, just a bit more. I'm guessing the threads are a little bit deformed from the welding. I think this one got the hottest, but it's going in fine. It just doesn't go in with my hands that well. So now the fun part begins, which is doing this on the inners. I don't need to actually position it up. All I want to do is see where I can put these so I avoid these with the additional plate where I don't have the depth for the nuts. Well, I hope I'm doing it a bit smarter this time. So ahead of time I added a groove here for my fillet weld so I can get some penetration, hopefully penetrate the entire thickness of this 3/8 between the backside weld and this corner one. Then I won't have to grind out much, if at all, of the weld that I leave in there and still have a sharp corner. So there's a bit of a space in there. Again, I'm going to tack it on with a MIG and then do at least this face with the 6011 so it penetrates. So these are all square for now. We'll see what the welding does to them. I had thoughts of actually just welding this, completing it with the MIG, but the wind is just too much. The shield gas doesn't really stay in place when the wind's blowing. In fact, you can see here, it's almost like I wasn't using a shielding gas, even though I was, because the wind was whipping along when I did that particular tack. So back to the 6011, get these welded home. So these are done. I actually stayed quite square, these two surfaces. So there's a little bit of a bump there. Most of the weld is inside the groove. So I'm just going to take a grinder and just knock off the high spots, and then we'll try it on to see if it fits flush or if I need to grind more. So I've got the bolts, the washers, and the nuts all mounted on here. Now I need to put this underneath on the inside, clamp it in place, and then tack these, actually strike that. First thing I need to do is clean up this. So underneath here, underneath the excavator, take two. So underneath here I've got the location to the center of the nut marked out. And that is just so I can clean up the rust and dirt so I have a good clean surface to weld on. So I've got the nuts and bolts snugged up here. So I will clamp this in place and then tack the nuts on. Alright, so what I think is happening, this is actually probably not the best example, but it's the easiest one to look at, is the bottom of that nut is hitting on the weld. So, maybe you can see it on this one. The bottom of the nut there. Maybe this one. Anyhow, I can't see it very well, but I think that's what's happening. So I'm going to take this off, grind the bottom, sort of put an angle or a chamfer on the bottom of that nut, and see if I can't get this lip, because this edge here needs to be relatively flush to that one, and right now I'm probably over 1/4 of an inch off. So it's hard for me to tell in there, but I think there's a bit more clearance. If you remember this, either this is bowed a bit or the frame is bowed a bit. So I'm going to put a clamp out here, try to lift this up, and then I should be able to push that in flush. So this is not exactly flush, but what I think I'm going to do is tack the nuts on there. Could be that the nuts are interfering and I need to grind them down a bit. It could be that the corner here is interfering, but I can do that after I tack the nuts on. It'll give me some more visibility as to what's going on, and then try to flush this up as best I can. So it does look as though at least two of those nuts are protruding a little bit more beyond the surface of this edge here. So I'm going to grind those down, grind them all down, make sure they're relatively flat, and we'll try it again. So all the nuts have been ground flush to this surface here. Let's install it and see what it looks like. So these 4 holes, only one of them, it looks like it might need to be adjusted a little bit, take a little bit out there where the white mark is. But I did notice as I was taking it off, the reason it wasn't bolting up so well and why I couldn't find one bolt is that it was stuck here. So it could be that this hole would line up better if this bolt wasn't in the way. But anyhow, so I'll elongate this and we'll put it back up. So all was going well until I came to the last bolt, and the threads got galled up. I was able to get it out, luckily, but you can see that's what galled threads look like, and the nut, the internal threads are all messed up. So I'm gonna have to cut this off and put a new one on. Darn it! So new nut welded on there, so hopefully that repair is complete, not to have to be redone. But some of the other nuts I noticed went in a little bit hard. I mean, you couldn't thread them in easily you couldn't thread them in by hand like this at all. This one actually is pretty good. But the other one, so I'm afraid that I may do the same thing to some other nuts. So what I think I've heard before is to just sort of chase threads. You can take a bolt like this, and I'm going to use a die grinder, and just sort of cut some flutes, maybe 3 or 4, and it'll act a little bit of a cutting edge to remove some of the galling, which should just be sort of loosely adhered metal, I'm guessing, inside the threads. So this, I cut this is actually the bolt that had the galled end, but the rest of the threads are fine, so I cut the galled end off. See, that thread's on fine. So that's what I'm going to try, and chase the threads on the nuts to see if I can make them go in any easier. Will it work? Can't hurt. Let's give it a try. This is one I know that was going in a little bit hard. Huh. Well, I guess I'll call that a win. I think it's better. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's better than it was. It's still not like a fresh bolt and nut, but welding it, I'm sure, probably deformed things a little bit. I'll do that to the other nuts and call that as good as we can reasonably get. So I've got the two pieces mated up together. This is sort of my datum or reference point where it lines up evenly with this. So they're both lined up. I have located where I want to have my rounds, 1¼ rounds, where the white dots are, and I put a prick there, a starting hole to drill. So with this particular mag drill, it comes with a chuck that you can put into the, I'm not sure what the name of that coupling is, but where the annular cutters go that have the two detents. But you have to slide the motor up a little bit to provide enough room. So what I'm going to do is drill a hole just a little bit bigger than 1/4 inch that matches the center dowel, or I'm not sure what the name of it is, that go in the annular cutter, just so I can locate the hole for both sides, because this side is going to have a 13/16 hole and the other side is going to have the 1¼ hole. So I'll drill these pilot holes. So these are the holes for the bolt. I have longer bolts, but they'll go on this side and capture the threaded end to that 1¼ inch that's on here. So basically that's how that will go. Now the other side will be the entire diameter of this 1¼ inch. So this I cut off the end of that round. You can see here it's deformed. When they're clipping them at the mill, I think they just pinch them with some cutters probably while it's pretty hot. So it's deformed, but I cut off what I think is most of the deformity. And this does not fit easily, which I figured might be the case because they're both 1.25 inches. So any scale or anything on this is not going to let it fit. So I chamfered the ends a little bit with a file, and it probably would go if I tapped it in, but I don't want it to fit tight because when I set this up, this is going to be this will go through the hole, so it'll be relatively loose. I have to have some adjustment because I doubt that on the other end of that round, where the bolt goes into the threaded hole, it's going to be exactly perpendicular to this and line up. So I want to be able to move it just a little bit so I can fasten the other side of it with the bolt and then weld it or tack it while it's installed on the excavator, and then take it out and weld it thoroughly. So to make this work, I'll use my trusty die grinder, and it shouldn't take much. Yeah, look at that. And that was real time, so it's pretty quick. So that's basically what they'll look like. They're upside down. These are snug. I'll have to loosen them up. And then I just need to thread them through the hole. I'm not going to do it here. I'll do it with this one mounted. This one will be mounted on the outside. Then I'll put this one inside, or maybe I'll have to take them out. I'm not sure. It'll be an interesting experiment to see how well they go together so I can weld the ends. I did blow all these out, and one of them I noticed there was some shaving, so that might have caused my galling. It might have been self-induced on the inner side that I had to torch and remount that nut. So if these have a habit of coming loose, then in use, I wanted fine thread. Fine thread's a little bit more resistant to loosening up with vibration. Get a little bit more torque on them, or a little more force with the same torque, I should say. But they didn't come in the lengths that I wanted. Fine thread is much more limited in the length, so I went with coarse thread, knowing they might be subject to loosening up. But if they do, I'll just put some Loctite on it. But for now, it's grease so that the rust is not a problem. So I'm just going to snug them up with my impact driver. Hopefully I can torque them down when the rounds are welded and they all line back up again. So I chased all these nuts with my homemade chasing tool. It did seem to work, at least enough to allow these to go in very easily by hand. So that's a keeper. Now the fun part, and I did blow them out with air like I did the other side after I chased them, and there was a bunch of crap in there, so I'm guessing that's how I did myself in on that galled bolt, is having junk in there. But every time I add something to this, it gets heavier for some reason. So this is a challenge because I'm going to have to bolt this up at the same time fish these rounds in. Oh boy, that one was easy. That one's in, this one's in. Whoa! That went a lot easier than I was thinking. What did I say about junking my threads? Now I got a bunch of gravel in them. Nice! So there they be. There's a lot of porosity. There's a little bit of a breeze. I was trying to cover it up with my hand the best I could. So these are not really structural welds. It's really more like a rivet, just providing some stuff so it can't sort of pull through. You know, maybe it would have been better off using a stick, but for the purposes of this weld, I think it's fine. So let it cool off, put it back in, and hope everything bolts back up again. So with that side done, if you want to watch me do the other side, then go back to the beginning of this video and hit play. And just pretend I say left side when I'm saying right side. So, yeah, I'm not going to film doing the rest of this. Maybe just a brief blurb when it's all done. And my first time using it to see what sort of scraping and wear might be on the bottom side of the grousers. And that's about it. So the other modification I had talked about was something with this thumb. You can see here they welded a plate on and welded tooth holders and put teeth on, which I don't know why they put teeth on there, but they did. But they don't line up well. So I'm thinking I'll do something here, maybe make it a little bit wider. Maybe use tooth holders like this because they're a good shape. They're already made. They're certainly weldable. And just put them between the teeth. But that's for another day, another month, maybe even another year, who knows. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it.